Not the drones are already in the air. Not one or two moving toward a single defended point, but a swarm spreading across the battle space, low enough to compress reaction time and dense enough to change the shape of the engagement before the first impact lands. At first, the warning does not look like collapse. It looks like contact. A track appears on the screen, then another. Then several more enter the defensive picture from different angles. That is when the system starts losing its clean sequence. Russian air defense systems are built around a chain. Detect the threat, classify it, prioritize it, assign a response, intercept it, confirm the result, and prepare for the next engagement. But a drone swarm attacks that chain directly. It does not need to destroy every radar or every launcher. It only needs to force the system to process more threats than it can control. That is where the failure begins. Before the explosions, before the footage, before the visible collapse. A mobile launcher can still be present. A radar can still be scanning. Operators can still be reacting. Interceptors can still be firing. But presence is not control. Response is not control. Movement is not control. The danger is not that the defense does nothing. The danger is that the defense does everything at once and still loses the sequence. Every incoming drone demands attention. Each track has to be understood quickly enough to matter, but the swarm keeps closing while the system is still sorting the picture. Therefore, the defense is forced to make decisions before the engagement is clean. A conventional air defense fight wants order. Detect, assign, fire, confirm, reset. The swarm denies that order. One drone may be moving toward a radar site. Another may be aimed at a fuel point. Another may be a decoy. Another may be carrying the real charge. Another may only exist to draw fire away from the drone that matters. The system has to decide which threat comes first. But the swarm does not pause for the decision. And once the defense starts deciding late, every following decision begins under more pressure than the last. The air defense is now reacting, and from the outside that can look like strength. A launcher rotates, a radar sweeps, weapons engage. The defended zone appears active. But activity is not the same as control, because the system is now being forced to answer too many questions at once. Which drone matters most? That question sounds simple only from a distance. On the screen, the swarm does not arrive with labels. The defense has to separate threat from noise, decoy from weapon, distraction from priority. But each separation takes time, and time is exactly what the swarm is removing. That is classification overload. The system is not blind. It sees too much, and because it sees too much, it has to process too much before it can act with discipline. A single missile is a focused problem. A small group of aircraft is a structured problem. But a dense drone swarm is a pressure field, because each target is small enough to complicate tracking, cheap enough to be expendable, and dangerous enough to demand a response. That combination narrows the defender's options. Ignore the wrong drone, and the defended target may be hit. Engage too many drones, and interceptors drain. Fire too early, and ammunition may be wasted on decoys. Wait too long, and the real strike elements move closer. Therefore, the swarm does not create one hard choice. It creates many bad choices under time pressure. Every drone creates a demand: sensor attention, operator judgment, fire control assignment, ammunition, confirmation. But those demands do not arrive in sequence. They arrive together while the attack is still moving. The swarm is not only occupying airspace, it is occupying the decision cycle. The launchers may still function, the crews may still be trained, the radar may still feed data into the system. But the relationship between detection and control is being stretched by every new track that enters before the last one has been resolved. A late classification creates a late priority. A late priority creates a late intercept. A late intercept creates a missed drone. And a missed drone does not just become damage, it becomes the starting condition for the next defensive decision. Therefore, the swarm does not need perfect success. It only needs the defense to fall behind. Now the engagement becomes physical. Drones close from multiple angles. Some stay low enough to compress reaction time. Some force attention upward. Some arrive together, making the defense divide fire before it fully understands which track matters most. The launcher can only engage what it is assigned. The radar can only track within its limits. The crew can only respond to the picture it receives. But the picture is no longer clean. This is where prioritization stress becomes visible. The defense has to choose between the nearest drone, the fastest one, the one aimed at the launcher, the one moving toward the radar, and the one that looks like a decoy but might not be. Every choice protects one part of the system by exposing another. A shot fired at one drone is a shot not fired at another. A launcher turned toward one sector leaves another sector thinner. An interceptor spent on a low-value target reduces the depth available for the next threat. Therefore, the swarm turns air defense into a resource allocation problem under impact conditions. And the resources are finite. Interceptors are finite. Radar attention is finite. Crew focus is finite. Command bandwidth is finite. Time is finite. The attack is built around that limit. A swarm does not have to win every duel to change the outcome. It can lose aircraft and still succeed. If cheap drones pull expensive interceptors into the air, the defender is already paying the higher price. If the defense holds fire to preserve ammunition, the swarm gains distance. If the defense fires aggressively, the swarm exposes the depth problem. That is intercept inefficiency. The defense may shoot down drones and still lose control of the engagement, because every successful intercept still has to be followed by confirmation and reassignment. But the swarm keeps adding new tracks before that work is complete. One drone falls, but more remain. Another appears from a different angle. Another slips closer while the system confirms the last intercept. Another forces the launcher to reorient before the crew has restored the defensive picture. The defense is winning moments while losing the sequence. A system can destroy individual threats and still be overwhelmed by the shape of the attack. The battlefield does not measure the defense only by how many drones were intercepted. It measures whether the defended target remained intact, whether command stayed coherent, whether ammunition depth survived, and whether the next wave can still be met with control. If the defense spends too much to stop too little, the swarm has changed the exchange. If the defense fires before it understands the full pattern, the swarm has taken command of the timing. The visible battle is drones against air defense. But the real battle is tempo against control. And once tempo wins, the defense becomes reactive. Reactive defense can survive for a while, which is why the failure can be hard to see at first. The system may still fire. Crews may still report engagements. Radar may still track targets. Command may still believe the defensive layer is active. But the quality of control has changed. The defense is no longer shaping the engagement. It is chasing it. Coverage begins to fragment because the system is pulled toward the most visible pressure. One sector receives too much attention, but another receives too little. A launcher commits to one cluster. Therefore, a second cluster finds the gap. A radar focuses on dense movement. Therefore, a smaller track gains time near the defended target. The system is not collapsing all at once. It is being pulled apart by competing demands. This is how overwhelm by volume becomes structural. The defense is not defeated simply because it lacks weapons. It is defeated because the attack creates more simultaneous demand than the defensive chain can absorb. Detection without clean classification becomes noise. Classification without priority becomes delay. Priority without available intercept capacity becomes exposure. Intercept without confirmation becomes uncertainty. And uncertainty forces another response. Therefore, each defensive action consumes more of the system without necessarily restoring control. The deeper consequence is the loss of reliable sequence. Air defense depends on sequence. Find the threat, understand the threat, assign the response, engage, confirm, reset. But the swarm attacks each step by making the next demand arrive before the previous step has produced order. Most importantly, it denies the reset. A defense that cannot reset cannot regain tempo. It remains trapped inside the previous wave while the next one is already arriving. That is when the system begins making decisions from a degraded state. Less ammunition, less clarity, less confidence, less coverage, and less time. Once those losses stack, the next swarm does not have to be larger. It only has to arrive before order has been restored. This is why drone volume is not just a numerical problem. It is a sequencing weapon. It compresses the time between detection and impact until the defense has to act before it fully understands. It forces expensive systems to engage cheap threats on unfavorable terms. It turns local success into system exhaustion. The visible result may be a destroyed launcher, a damaged radar, a hit ammunition point, or a penetrated defended area. But the deeper result is the authority break inside the defensive system. The components may still exist, but clean control over the engagement is gone. The doctrine is clear. Air defense does not fail only when it is destroyed. It fails when incoming volume exceeds the system's ability to classify, prioritize, engage, confirm, and maintain control under pressure. That is the lesson inside the drone swarm. Modern defenses are not measured only by range, radar power, or interceptor quality. They are measured by how long they can preserve order under saturation. A high-end system can still be pressured by low-cost threats if those threats arrive in enough numbers, from enough angles, and at the right tempo. The attacker does not need a better interceptor. The attacker can build a cheaper target in greater numbers and force the defender into an inefficient exchange. That changes the logic of the battlefield. A low-cost drone can create an expensive decision on the ground. A decoy can pull attention away from the real strike. A cluster can expose the launcher pattern. A repeated wave can reveal ammunition depth. A surviving drone can damage the node that makes the next response possible. Therefore, volume becomes doctrine not because it replaces precision, but because it creates the conditions that allow precision to pass through. The swarm stretches the system. The real strike exploits the stretch. The defense burns resources trying to close gaps that keep reopening. And the commander faces the hard truth. A defended target is not protected simply because air defense equipment is present nearby. Protection only exists if the system can preserve sequence under pressure. That means layered coverage, cheap counters for cheap threats, ammunition depth for repeated waves, classification that separates decoy from danger quickly, and command structures that can prioritize without freezing. Most of all, it means understanding that interception is not the same as control. A defense can be active and still be losing. It can engage and still be behind. It can destroy many threats and still fail to protect the target that mattered. The battlefield is shifting toward attacks that do not only challenge the weapon, they challenge the defensive process. They attack the chain between seeing and deciding. They attack the gap between firing and regaining order. They attack the assumption that a system responding quickly is still in command. That assumption is no longer safe. Because once the swarm fills the sky, the central question is not whether Russian air defenses can shoot something down. The central question is whether they can keep control while too many threats demand a response at once. Ukraine's drone swarm overwhelms Russian air defenses because the system can keep firing, keep reacting, and keep moving, while control is already gone.